On page 7, 2 lines from the top of the page. Our discussion today is the year. First, counting the years in not only biblical times, but also counting the year in many different avenues. For example, rental. So in a simple way, we are dealing nowadays with a secular year, Gregorian calendar, but in the Jewish way, since we explained at the beginning of this tractate that there are different Rosh Hashanah, different New Years, so now we zoom in with that. So we start with the first Rosh Hashanah in the Mishnah, 2 lines from top of page 7. Tanu Rabbanan be'echad b'Nisan, Rosh Hashanah לחודשים ולעיבורים ולתרומת שקלים ושומרים על שכירות בתים. First day of month of Nisan, beginning of the year for the month. Simply speaking, biblical time, you do not have a month like the Hebrew names we're using for Nisan, Iyar, Sivan. All of that happened as a result of exile. The Jewish people went to Babylon, they called it those names. Biblically speaking, we have the first month. The first month, we understand it's Nisan. Soon we zoom in and see how we get to that. But first month of now, meaning Babylon time, is called Nisan, which is, again, biblical time, is called the first month. That's the first month for counting the month, which means the Ritva elaborated and he said, when we are dealing with Pesach, Passover, the Exodus, we go by the month of the first month, which is month of Nisan, and also Vela Iburim, to make a leap year, meaning Rashi tells us, in order for the rabbinic court to add another month, for like we have this year, the month of Adar, so in the month of Nisan, which is the beginning of the year, the rabbinic court have a session to make a decision if there's a need to make the following year a leap year. Rambam elaborate and he tells us in Sefer Zmanim Hilchot Kiddush HaChodesh chapter 4, although the court may calculate leap years several years in advance, it must not declare the leap year of any given year until after Rosh Hashanah. If it declared the matter before Rosh Hashanah, its declaration is infactual. So, we have another phase here, which is the Letrumat Shkalim. Letrumat Shkalim, meaning the time that they collected the half a shekel. This is a well-known biblical faith that said that the treasurer collected a contribution and give a public offering. So it is a time that we collected, which is the month of Adar. Yet, in the beginning of Nisan, they start using that money for public offering. Now, the deal is, as the Mishnah tells us in Tractate Shkalim, you cannot use money from the previous year. Meaning, since you're counting the year from the 1st of Nisan, all the public treasure, all the public collection of the half a shekel of the money that needed for public offering has to be counted from the new year, and again, the new year counting from when? From the 1st of Nisan. ויש אומרים, listen to this, אף לשכירות בתים. It's also applied to what? To lease, rental of houses. Now, this is a little mind-boggling. Why? Tosfot tells us on page 16b, Tosfot said that the issue here is, let's say we're counting the year from the beginning of Nisan, which for our language, for our time, For this year, we just use it lucidly, the month of April, right? So imagine if a fellow made a contract, and the contract said 1 year rent, that typical lease. And it said, here's the money for what? For a yearly rental, begins today. Let's say today is the first day of month of Adar. So what's going to happen? When is the year ended?
The 30th
of Adar.
Of Adar.
Which means you are paying, for example, let's go small. Let's say you're renting a room, cost you $500 a month. You give a check for $6,000. When? At the first day of month of Adar. And the contract said it's 1 year. What does that mean by the contract? By the contract it means that 30 days later the contract expired.
Right.
Meaning the first day of month of Nisan, 30 days later, you start a new year. Right. So what happened to my money? So it may happen you gave it to a guy as a gift or as a picadon, like to hold it. But as far as the contract is concerned, since we started the 1st of Nisan, it's done. It's gone, which means the 30 days later, it's over. So later we discuss how that's possible. What exactly happened if you count the year in that manner, if you don't specify for that this is contractual for month by month, like typical lease. Anyway, לחודשים מנהלן, how do you know the beginning of Nisan? You count the months. He said, דכתיב, the Torah said, excuse me, in Exodus chapter 12, החודש הזה לכם ראש חודשים. This month will be for you the beginning of the month. ראשון הוא לכם לחודשי השנה. It will be the first one of counting the months of the year. דברו אל עדת בני ישראל לאמור. You speak to the congregation of Israel saying, בעשור לחודש הזה, the Torah said at the 10th of that month, ויקחו להם איש סלע לבית אבות, סלע בית, every person should take, it's a famous story in Egypt, והלך למשמרת על 14 לחודש ושחטו אותו, it should be for safeguard until the 14 days, then they make the Paschal lamb. Meaning that that month is the first month. Let me ask you a question. Prove to me from that line that this month is the Nisan. The Torah just said this month will be for you the first month. How do you know that this month means Nisan from this text? Anyone knows? So the answer is, you're right, is no source. Because if you look by the text itself, the Torah did not say.
Right.
The Torah said, "Hachodesh hazeh lachem." This month should be for yourself, Rosh Chodashim, beginning of the months. Rishon hu lachem. This will be the first one for all the months. So how do I know that that's not Tishrei, Iyar, Tevet? How do I know that that's a Nisan? Uchtiv. Here is the first source. Now we're going to make some type of juxtaposition. We're going to make a comparison. Why? Because in regards to Paschal Lamb, the Torah said in Deuteronomy chapter 16, Shamor et chodesh ha'aviv, you should safeguard the month of the spring, ve'asita Pesach, and you shall make a Pesach. So it means what? We now understand that the Pesach is the month of what? Of the spring. Eizu chodesh sheyesh bo aviv. Give me an example of a month that the spring occurred, which means this is the time you see the harvest.
Right, ready.
Ready. When is that month? So Rashi tells us that this is the time that it's like, it's come from the word Av. Av meaning firstborn, first one. So it means that this is the time that the field is ready. to be harvested, to be collected. ואומר זה ניסן. You may say that that's the month of Nisan, the first month.
Right.
וקרא לראשון. So we call it the first of the months. So you see what's going on? We just compare the two sources, and we said that's the source, that this is the first month. The Gemara challenged that. They said, how do you know it? Ve'ima Iyar. We are now in the month of Iyar. What happened in the month of Iyar? Part of the harvest is ready at full, at the time. Some of that happened a month later, now, the month of Iyar. So the Gemara said, Be'ina Aviv Veleika. So we are looking for the time of Aviv, which is the time of spring, and which is ripening, the time that it's ready. Veleika, and it's not appropriate for Iyar. Why? Because we are going by the first stage of ripening, and the first stage of ripening is Nisan. In Iyar, for some of the fields, some of the materials, it's already late. So therefore, since we talk about Rishon, the first one, it has to be Nisan. Wait a second, if you tell me that, Ve'ema Adar, so let's go even a month earlier. The month of Adar, it's also a time that some of the harvesting is ready at that time. So it said, Ba'inan, Rov Aviv Veleika. We require that most of the ripening takes place, and this is not the case of Adar, because most of the grain ripens during the month of Nisan, which is the following month. So the Gemara said, wait a second, Midei Rov Aviv Ktiv. You mean to say that most of the ripening written in this pasuk? No, the Torah just used the word Aviv, spring. So maybe it's applied to an early stage. So Rav Chizda came in and said, you know what? I have a different source, and that's it. El Amar Rav Chizda mehacha. The Torah said in Leviticus chapter 23, Ach ב-15 yom לחודש השביעי. But at the 15th day of the 7th month, באוספכם את תבואת הארץ, when you are gathered in the fruit of the land. So, ואיזו חודש שיש בו אסיפה, what is the month that you gather the land? Now, in Israel, the rain is only in the winter time. So after you gather the harvest, you make it a pile, and you leave it to dry out during the summertime. And then when it's close to the raining season, you put it back in the storage houses. So which month is the month of gathering? ואומר זה תשרי וקקר אלי שביעי. So it means the month of Tishrei, and the pasuk, the Torah, use it for the 7 months. So if you're going now backward from the number 7 to number 1, now we understand that that's applied to the month of Nisan. Ve'ema Mar Cheshvan. So may you say that that's applied to the month of Mar Cheshvan, which you mean is 7. Umay Shvi'i. And why 7? Shvi'i Iyar. 7 from our months now, from the month of Iyar. So they said, Be'ina Asif Veleika. You have to have the gathering. And the gathering, it's not apply because people gather their grain and put it in a pile before the raining season, which is before the month of Mar Cheshvan. Ve'ima Elul. We try another month of Elul, that again they gather some of the grain houses. Umay Shvi'i le'Adar, maybe 7 for the Adar. It says Ba'inan Rov Asif Veleika. Again, you have to go most of the gathering. It's written, and you don't have it. So they ask, if that's the case, so how about Midei Rov Asif Ktiv? So they said most of the gathering, the same idea. אלא אמר אבינה, דבר זה מתורת משה רבנו, לא מדברי קבלה למדנו. In other words, if you go by the Torah, it's very hard to bring the source. You have to go by the tradition that we receive orally from our ancestors. Meaning, some of that you see as sources from the prophets and from the writings and chronicles, but another part is the way that we receive as a tradition. Soon you see books like late books like Esther, etc. There is a few different avenues what exactly mean divrei Kabbalah, the things that we receive by the tradition. Here is the source, because it's written in Zechariah, the first chapter, ביום 24 ל-12 חודש, הוא חודש שבט. 24th day of the 12 months, and the sentence, the pasuk says explicitly that this is the month of Shvat. So since what we said, that the Shvat is the 11 months, now you go backward 11 months, meaning 10 months, which is the first month, it has to be Nisan. Now, Tosfot tells us here from Yerushalmi, he said that the whole concept of the names, as we mentioned, it's basically happened in Babylon. He said the way that they call it early time, it's, for example, for Tishrei, they use the word Yerach HaEtanim. Etanim, it's a different name for our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, etc. So they use that as the first one, like the ancestors. And then, for example, that's what said, using the word Bul, that applied to the month of Mar Cheshvan, or the month of Iyar, according to Tosfot, it's called Ziv. Ziva Ilanot. This is the time that you see the trees out. So, in other words, it was originally in a biblical time is the first, the second, etc. Post-biblical time, only upon exile in Babylon, they use those names of months. Anyway.
They were Babylonian. They were taken from Babylonian.
Some of them, it's a real ancient Babylonian names.
Okay, all right.
If you look at the months like name of Tammuz, right, is some names of all kind of Babylon entities.
Okay.
Right. Anyway, I read once in a book. So if that's the case, why we don't go back to the biblical time and use the first and the second? So one of the early sages said that we are waiting for the fulfillment of Isaiah prophecy when all the Jews gather in the land of Israel will go back. Anyway, so they said, Rabba bar Ula amar mehacha. Now we see sources from the book of Esther. So I ask you a question. In the book of Esther, how many times in the book of Esther, how many months mentioned in the book of Esther? Book of Esther, you have several months. So the answer is they have 4 different months in the book of Esther. How do you know that? So here is the first source. They said in Esther chapter 2, ותילקח אסתר אל המלך אחשוורוש אל בש מלכותו, והחודש העשירי הוא חודש טבת. Esther was taken to Achashverosh, the king, which is the 10th month. Now the text, this is the month of Tevet. So since we have here a source in the book of Esther that Tevet is the 10th month, go backward 9 months, has to be the first month, which is Nisan. Rav Kahana, אמר מאחד, they said in Zechariah 7, ב-14 לחודש התשיעי בכסלו. Again, you see the word Kislev and you see the word 9. Kislev, 9 months. Meaning you go backward 8 months. רב אחא ביעקב אמר מאחא, again, book of Esther, chapter 8, ויקראו סופרי המלך בחרית ההיא בחודש שלי וחודש סיוון. The scribe of the king was asked to come at the 3rd month, which is the month of Sivan. 3rd month, you go backward 2 months, is Nisan. Rav Ashi Amar Me'acha said in Esther chapter 3, הפיל פור הגורל לפני המן מיום ליום וחודש לחודש 12 חודש אדר. Haman, the evil man, made this lottery, and it was the 12 months. You go backward 11 months. This is Nisan. והבאתם המאחה בחודש הראשון הוא חודש ניסן. That's the beginning of the sentence. So you can go back simply the beginning of the sentence and you're done. וכולו מהייתם על אומרי מאי. So if that's the source, so why you don't use that the beginning of the sentence, that's the month? דילמה, מהי ראשון ראשון למילתי. Maybe that's applied to evil Haman, that when the first man he went and he get to the throne, the first thing he thought is to get rid of the Jews, to show how evil he was there, how jealous he was at Mordechai, and how strong it was in his mind to get rid of the Jews. So therefore, that may appear that that's the reason for using first. First meaning it was the first in his evil mind. V'tana didan. So how about our Tana that not mention Nisan as the beginning of the month of the year? בשנים כמה יראה, בחודשים לא כמה יראה. So we are speaking about counting of years, but not counting the months. So Tosfot ask, if that's the case, the Mishnah mentioned that the beginning of Nisan is the beginning of the year for the festival. So if that's the case, so how come you use festivals as they count? So he explained that festivals, it's the Yechidat Zman, it's the measurement of certain time meaning counting festivals, but it's not applies to contractual matters, etc. So also mention Vele Iburin, the time that you make the leap year, which means the first of Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah beginning for a leap year. Liburin Nisan Maninan, so you're counting from Nisan to make a leap year, which means you mean to say that the Bet Din allowed to see it so earlier at the month of Nisan to make a decision that it's going to be a leap year 12 months from now. והתניא אין מעברים את השנה לפני ראש השנה, which means the Bet Din will not make a decision to make it a leap year before the time of the first day of month of Tishrei. ואם עברוה אינה מעוברת. They said if the Bet Din in gather earlier than the first of Tishrei, we don't take it as a regulation of a leap year. אבל מפני הדחק. Unfortunately, again, you see a part of what happened to our people in history, the persecution, etc. The fear is that whatever the Jewish people were, the rulers, the king, the whoever is the country they stay in, they forbid the Bet Din to ingather, or the head of the rabbinic court needs to be by the king, all kind of circumstance, and therefore they will not be able to make it a leap year. So in that press need, מעברים אותה אחר ראש השנה מיד. So they make it a session of the Bet Din before Rosh Hashanah, and then they announce to public right after Rosh Hashanah, ואף על פי כן, so אין מעברין אל האדר. So it means that the additional month has to be at the end of the year, which is the month of Adar, make it a leap year. So if that's the case, what does that mean when we said earlier that the first of Nisan, it's the beginning of the year for leap year? אמר רב נחמן בר יצחק, מהי עיבורין? הפסקת עיבורין. This is the time that we announce that the time that we can make as a leap year for the past year, which means for the moment that the month of Nisan began, it's the completion of the previous year in regards to a leap year, and it's start of a new year, because the moment you sanctify the month of Nisan, you cannot make it a second Adar. So the whole idea, the whole concept of leap year applies up to that moment of the sanctification of the new month. The moment you sanctify the month of Nisan, it's over, it's a new year. Detnan, it's a well-known Mishnah in Tractate Yod, chapter 7. Hen, which is the two we mentioned earlier, Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Papayas, Heidu, they witnessed, Sheme'abrin et Hashana kol Adar, which means we make a leap year up to the end of month of Adar. The Bet Din make a decision to make it a leap year if they need. Shehayu omrim, it was the sages that said, Ad Purim, until 14th day of month of Adar. So it means this Braita mentioned the first day of month of Nisan as the Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the year, for no longer a leap year, following the witness of these two sages, Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Papayas, so that the Bet Din can make those decisions, but is a time restraint, which is the end of the month of Adar. So why the Mishnah in Eduyot said that those decisions has to be up to the time of Purim? Kevan de Amar Mar, because the Tana teaches in the Braita, Shoalim Bilchot Pesach Kodem La Pesach 30 Yom. We said that we have the requirement 30 days before Pesach, since Pesach involving so many halachic issues. So we should start study 30 days in advance before Pesach, all the halachot, all the laws involved with Pesach. So therefore, when is the 30 days before Pesach? If Pesach occurred on the 14th of Nisan, you go back 30 days, is the 14th of Adar. This is the time, 14th of Adar is the festival, minor festival of Purim. This is the time that you have to hear the public speakers about Pesach. You have to discuss the law of Pesach. You have to make those decisions. And then the Bet Din make a decision to all of a sudden not to make it a Pesach, but to make it a leap year, which means now it turned to be what? The month of Nisan turned to be the second Adar. Guess what people are going to do? They're going to denigrate, they're going to belittle the law of Chametz. So meaning those people who live in the far away community, they will not hear soon the Bet Din decision to make the year a leap year. And then you have those emissaries that travel far away to let people in those communities know that now all of a sudden this month is not Nisan, but instead is the second of Adar. They will not trust those emissaries, and they follow what they heard in the local, because imagine, you go to a shul, you hear the rabbi say that let's talk about Pesach, is 30 days from now is going to be Pesach, beautiful. 2 weeks later, all of a sudden, the shlichim, the emissaries come from Eretz Israel and said, no, this month is Adar. Right? Now, guess what's happening now? The people mix up all of that, and therefore when it's come to a real Pesach, they're going to eat chametz. Because, as we said, people are not educated. They said, I heard it from my rabbi in the synagogue. He told me that this is the time of Pesach, that's it. Right? Ve'idach, made a yediyah deshata me'abarta b'chush b'natay milta, that the people know that the whole idea of making a leap year depend upon those experts that make this calculation. Vesabrei, and people think that the reason that was make a decision as a leap year, which means that the rabbis did not complete the way of counting. So therefore, people who live far away will believe those emissaries, and they will not be stubborn to observe the Pesach according to the original counting. So they said, you see all this mix up with people, ותנא דידן, בהתחלה כמיירא, בהפסקה כל המיירא. לא כמיירא, which means if at the beginning of the year, that's discussed, but not from the time that the year stopped. So you see why the Tana of the Mishnah not mentioned the leap year. David worked for the Statistic Bureau for many years, right? You know what the government put out a word for public, and what, if they're not 100% sure that people understand, they keep it for themselves. I'm right?
Absolutely.
That's the way it is. Okay. Then the Baita said, "Veletrumat shkalim." The beginning of Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah, beginning of the year, in accepting or distribution of donation, half a shekel, that was taken from people, but you go by the new year. You cannot take the collection of the previous year and use it for public offering. Nisan is the beginning of Trumat Alishka, to take the donation for that. So how do you know it? Menalan, Amar Rabbi Yoshua Amar Kra, because the Torah said in regards to additional offering of Rosh Chodesh, of the new month, in the book of Numbers, chapter 28, Zot olat chodesh bechodsho lechodshei hashana. So why we repeat the word chodesh bechodsho, month by the month? Amra Torah, chadesh ve'ave korban mitruma chadasha, which means one of the month, the beginning of the month, you have to start the public offering with the money that was selected from the new one. Vegamrei shana shana menisan. They make the juxtaposition from the word shana in two places, lechodshei hashana shana, with this text that it's written in regards to month of Nisan. That also the Torah used the word shana. Dichtiv, in regards to month of Nisan, in the book of Exodus chapter 12, Rishonu lachem lechodshei hashana. This month is the beginning, as we mentioned earlier, for the month. So what do we derive from that? That the time people need to bring the public offering from the new collection of the money, from their new collection, it has to be when? The first day of Nisan. So the Gemara said, wait a second, we have the same words also in Tishrei. Veligmor shana shana mitishrei. Because it's written there, dichtiv, in Deuteronomy 11, mereshit hashana. And Tosfot said that later the Gemara proved that that's applied to Tishrei. So why we did not derive from here that Rosh Hashanah applies to what? To Trumat Shkalim, those half a shekel, you start doing that when? The beginning of the Tishrei. דנין שנה שיש עמה חודשים משנה שיש עמה חודשים. We learn this גזירה שווה, this juxtaposition, the word shana meaning year, with the year that they have month, which means, for example, you need to have a public offering, the chodshei hashana. So you learn it from the month of Nisan, that's written chodshei hashana. ואין דנים שנה שיש עמה חודשים משנה שהם אין עמה חודשים, which is the month of Tishrei. Now we elaborate when it's come to public offering. אמר רב יהודה אמר שמואל, קורבנות ציבור הבאים באחד בניסן. You have an offering that was brought on the first of Nisan. מצווה להביא מן החדש, ואם הביא מן הישן יצא. לכתחילה, the first place, the mitzvah is to bring from the new one. But if you bring from the old one, so you fulfill it. You fulfill the obligation. So he said, אלא שחיסר מצווה. But he lacks of the mitzvah of bringing them from the new shkalim. ויחיד שיתנדב משלו. If one individual volunteered to bring that communal offering from his own property, הקשורים, we can use it for the altar, ובלבד שימסרם לציבור, as long as he consecrated those as a public consecration, because otherwise it's a private individual, it's not befitting for public offering. So the Gemara said, in other words, you can do it for you fellow, but you cannot do it for public. That's Gemara in Menachot 65. So the segment Pshita, that's obvious. If a person bring a voluntarily gift for public needs and he transferred to them, so why we make those offerings unfitting? So Mao the Tema, I may thought, Leichush Shema, I'm concerned that perhaps 7b לא ימסרם לציבור יפה. People, this is show you the ingenious of the rabbis. They know human psychology, the way of people thinking, and how people thinking. People said, "This is mine. I'm giving it for the public, so it's not in full heart. So you may consider that as a private offering, and if it's private offering, it make it unfitting for the altar. So kamash melan, we said that we're not concerned about it." And you bring it as a public offering, that individuals brought it and transfer it as a public. The Tana Didan, and Tana in the Mishnah, it doesn't mention beginning of the year for Trumat Shkalim, contribution of the half a shekel. Kevan Dektani Hevi Imevi, since the Brida teaches us, if a person bring the public offering from the offering of the past year, Yatzai, he fulfill his obligation. Lo psikale. So it means that Nisan is the beginning of the year for the Shkalim, and that's the reason why we omit it from the Mishnah. V'yesh omrim af l'schirut batim. We mentioned also in the Mishnah that when you have a lease, a rental, so you start the year from the 1st of Nisan. Tanu Rabbanan. Hamaskir ba'il chavero l'shana. You have a contract between two partners, Reuven and Shimon. Reuven renting a house to Shimon. So they agreed that the contract the lease will be for 1 year. Moneh 12 chodesh miyom liyom, which means they start from that day 12 months. V'im amar l'shana zo, but if the contract said, the agreement between two partners said for this year, afilu lo amad ela be'echad be'adar, kevan she'higia yom echad b'nisan alta lo shana. So it said, even they make the contract the 1st of Adar, which is the 12 months, so as far as the contract is concerned, at the 1st of Nisan, it's over. So Tosfot added to that and said, we have to remember that the money for that discussion is no meaning. He gave him, in a sense, he likes him, he gave him more money, or he gave him as an escrow. But as far as counting the year, it's over at that time. So, meaning, that's follow the opinion that the 1st of Nisan is the beginning of the year for rental. So when they use the word for this year, it's ended at the 1st of Nisan. ואפילו למד אמר יום אחד בשנה חשוב שנה, which means even you may think that the 29 of Adar, for extreme example, if you make a rental, it's already the next day is the second year. Shanehacha, here the rental is different. They said that people not make contractual agreement if it's less than 30 days. People not bothered. It's a huge undertaking, especially in those days, to write an agreement and to make the lease proper and the two parties will be happy, etc., etc. If the contract is below than 30 days, people don't bother with that. That's the minimum. Usually, if we talk about contract, most of the people don't like month by month, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most of the people like a yearly lease. So here we're talking about 30, below than 30 days, it's not something that people does. So therefore, the Eima Tishrei, so you may say that from the beginning of the Tishrei is the beginning of the year for what? For houses rental and not Nisan. So again, if a person rent to his fellow and the time of the rental was, for example, the 1st of Elul, the completion of the year may be at the Tishrei. So you have to remember the way that the Chidushei Aran said that all of that is rabbinic, which means rabbis follow the tradition that people use. For example, here the contractual agreement between parties that in a practical manners people make those contracts. And therefore, the big question is why, since most of the people counting the year, the beginning of the year from Rosh Hashanah, that we call Rosh Hashanah, the first day of Tishrei, why the bother to go for the month of Nisan? So they said, Stam ki agar nishbeita lekulu yamot hagshamim agar. So usually when people make those agreements, it's for the winter time. Why? It's not always convenience, but people can sleep on the grass outside in the summertime, right? And you go to a recreation area and you can sleep on the whatever it is, the grass or the sand, right? But the Ran said that in the real world, the contract is in the Tishrei. ותנא כמה דברייתא ותנא דידן בניסן נמי משכח שיח קיטרי. So they hold that even a month of Nisan, it's also a raining time. So it's still a part of which they call the winter season. So people don't like to complete their contractual agreement for rent at that time. Then one part of the Mishnah said, another part, באחד באלול ראש השנה למאסר בהמה. One of the Rosh Hashanah is the first day of month of Elul. This is the time for the animal tithe. Meaning, if you own a livestock, a flock, whatever it is in Eretz Israel, okay, so what do? You take the animal tithe, you count 9 for yourself, 10 for Hashem, and you bring it as an animal tithe. When is the time that you count and you bring it and the count is a year? You start when? The first day of the month of Elul. That's the first opinion in the Mishnah. Money. Who is the one who makes that decision that that's the proper time? Rabbi Meir, he Ditnan. We learn the Mishnah, Tractate Bchorot, page 57b. Rabbi Meir Omer Be'echad Be'elul Rosh Hashanah L'Ma'asar Be'ema. Rabbi Meir said the first day of month of Elul is the beginning of the year for animal tithe. Ve'lar galim, which means what's lar galim? Remember that we talk about you shall not delay, the Torah said. That's applied to festival, which is the time of Nisan. Mani, which Tana it's follow? Rabbi Shimoni, as we explained earlier. We said in the page 4 that Rabbi Shimon said, in order to be in violation of thou shall not delay, you need to pass what? 3 festivals. Eima Seifa. So let's go to the last clause of the Mishnah. Not everyone agree with that. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon omrim be'echad betishrei. These two great Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon hold that the beginning of animal tithe is what? When? Is the beginning of Tishrei. So they said Reisha v'Seifa Rabbi Shimon. You mean to say that the first clause of the Mishnah and the very last one follow the opinion of Rabbi Shimon versus Umtziata, which means the middle part, Rabbi Meir, follow Rabbi Meir, which is what? The first day of Elul. Is that correct to say? Amar Rav Yosef, Rav Yosef responded and he said, Rabbi, that's that Yachid, one individual's opinion, which is the third opinion. V'nasiv la aliba de Tanai. He goes by the opinion of the Tanaim. Bergalim, when it's come to the beginning of counting the Rosh Hashanah for the festivals, סבר לה כרבי שמעון. He all the same as רבי שמעון. ובמעשר בהמה, when it's come to animal type, he hold the same as Rabbi Meir, which is the first of Elul. If that's the idea that the whole Mishnah follow one, which is Rabbi, Arba'a, why the Mishnah use the term for New Year's? Chamisha havu. Why it's Chamisha? Let's sing together. First of Nisan is the beginning of the year Rosh Hashanah for what? For anointing kings.
Oh, right.
15 of Nisan is the beginning of the years for festivals.
Okay.
Then the first of Elul is the beginning of animal type. First of Tishrei is beginning of the year for sabbatical year. It's a year, sabbatical year, jubilee, etc.
Okay.
And the 15th of Shvat is the beginning of the Tu B'Shvat, the beginning of the year for the trees. So how many we are? We are 5.
Okay.
So Amarava, Arba'a ledivre hakol. Everyone said that there are 4 Rosh Hashanah. LeRabbi Meir, Arba'a dal regalim. According to Rabbi Meir, there are 4, and you have to exclude the festivals, because Rabbi Meir hold that a person is in a violation. You shall not delay even if he passed 1 festival. So therefore that excluded the idea of the festivals, and therefore follow that view. There are only 4 Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Shimon, that Rabbi Shimon hold that the 15 days of the month of Nisan is the beginning of the year for the festivals. Arba'a dal ma'asar behema. So he hold that ma'asar behema, the animal type, it's not count independently, because you already count from the first of Tishrei as the beginning of the year. So he said, therefore they have 4. Another option, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak אמר 4 חודשים ובהם כמה ראשי שנים. The Mishnah speaks about the 4 months, and they mention the month that you have beginning of the year, and not the beginning of the year themselves. So therefore the Mishnah mentioned the beginning of the year for kings and the beginning of the year for festival as 1, because both of them occurred on the month of Nisan. Meitile. 16 benisan, Rosh Hashanah laomer, which is what? 16 days of the month of Nisan is the beginning of the year for what? For the Omer, which means now we're counting the Omer every day, right? So he said, when you have the Omer offering, as from this day onward, it is permitted to eat from the new crop of grain. Shisha b'Sivan, Rosh Hashanah l'shtei alechem. The 6th day of month of Sivan is the new year for the 2 loaves, which is what? It was a public offering of 2 loaves from the new wheat brought on Shavuot. As from this day onward, it is permitted to sacrifice meal offering in the temple from the new grain. L'Rava litnei shisha, l'Rav Nachman litnei chamisha. According to Rava, let the Mishnah speak about 6 New Years, including the 16th of Nisan and the 6th of Sivan. And Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, we will have 5 New Years, since Sivan is a month in which there is a new year. So they said, Amarav Papa ki kachashiv mide dechail meoraita, something that starts in the eve of that day, because following Torah, that's the way Rashbam explained at the beginning of Torah, Vayerev Vayiboker. We start in the evening, mide dechail meoraita lo kachashi, something that's not go by the biblical concept, which is what? Start Vayerev Vayiboker, start the evening before. We don't count it. So since the new cup can be used at the 16th of Nisan, the following day when the time that bringing the Omer offering, and you cannot bring it the 6th day of Sivan, but only the following day when you have the 2 loaves. So that's the reason why the Tana did not count that as the beginning of the year. So the Gemara challenged that, they said, but there is a new year of festivals which does not begin in the evening, as the prohibition against delaying is not transgressed in the evening when the festival begins, but only in the morning. After the daily offering has been brought, as one is liable to bring the vow animal to the altar. So therefore, the answer, they said, Keivan shetzarich le'atuyei, אמר וכי כחשיב מדחי מרד ולחשיב ארגלים דחי מרד וכחשיב, okay? So they said, כיוון שצריך לעיתוי מעיקר המחייב, since a person needs to fulfill his vow at the time that he made the vow, since before the festival a person was obligated to bring his offering, and the festival is not the time restraint, the time that he needs to bring, and when it's come to the violation of thou shall not delay with the festival, it's not depend by the time of the offering, but it starts from the eve preceding it. But how about the New Year for Jubilees, which does not begin in the evening, but from the time of the shofar blast on Yom Kippur during the year? Because the Torah said in Leviticus 25, B'yom HaKippurim taviru shofar, on the day of atonement you shall blast the shofar, V'kidashtem, and you shall sanctify the Jubilee, the 50 years, V'kachashiv. And anyway, the Mishnah, the Tanai Mishnah, consider that as the beginning of the year for the Jubilee. So the response is, Rabbi Yishmael Nosh Rabbi Yochanan ben Brokai, the Amar Rosh Hashana, he said from the first day of the month of Tishrei, Chayil Yovel, the beginning of the Jubilee year. So later the Gemara elaborates on that, but they said, according to that view, the whole rules apply for what? From the first of Tishrei. So now we go to another explanation why we don't count those beginning of the Omer and the 2 loaves as beginning of the year. Rav Sheisha ben Ravidi Amar ki kachashi midelo tale b'maaseh. The Rosh Hashanah that's not depend upon for certain day, which means action day. You don't have Rosh Hashanah by certain activities. Midelo tale b'maaseh lo kachashi. So the things that depend upon an action, which means the offering of the Omer and the 2 loaves, that's something that they don't count. If you tell me that, how about festivals, that it's not depend upon action, which means the whole idea of you shall not delay apply only of bringing the morning offering. That's the time to bring the other offering, the kachashiv. And anyway, the Tana mentioned that in the Mishnah. So they said, Isu, the whole idea of Bal Te'acher, you shall not delay, Mimeila Chayel, does not depend upon anything else, but begins its own soon as the festival begin. So Rashi said, it's not depend upon morning offering. So basically, the Ritva elaborated, he said, that the Gemara here changed the direction and make a decision that the beginning of the year for Bal Te'acher, you shall not delay, it's depend upon the time of proper time of bringing the offering, vow offering and gift offering. Page 8, V'arei Ovlot. So how about Jubilee? The Jubilee, it's depend upon the certain actions, sounding of the shofar, and it's also mentioned in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yochanan ben Brokai, that they said that the Jubilee starts from the first of Tishrei in the evening, without any specific action. Sabach al-Hayr Achuya. Sabach al-Nur. ורב אשי אמר, 4 ראשי שנים הם, שהן ב4 ראשי חודשים. He says these 4 years that fall on the 4 new moons. However, there are also other new years that do not fall on new moon. So the Gemara said, באחד בשבט כבית שמאי. So does Rav Ashi count the first of Shvat as the new years, but the first of Shvat is new year only according to Beit Shammai. So they said, אחי כאמר, 3 דברי הכל. באחד בשבט מחלוקת בית שמאי בית הלל. So it means, according to Beit Hillel, it's not start only at the 2 Bishvat, the 15th of Shvat. So even at the beginning, the Tana said that the Rosh Hashana La'ilan, the beginning of the trees, it's between Rosh Hashana that start at the beginning of the month. Now we go back and explain that they follow only Beit Shammai, but not Beit Hillel, and we follow the halacha by Beit Hillel, which is the 2 Bishvat. Shulchan Aruch Yoreh De'ah 220 and Choshen Mishpat 312. According to most early authorities, if one rents a house without specifying for how long, or if the rent is for a year, the rental is for 12 months from that day. This ruling is not according to the way we mentioned the Braita, that the new year for renting houses is the 1st of Nisan. If the renter says that he is renting the house for this year, the Shach said that the new year begins on the 1st of Tishrei. We also speak about Shoalim v'Dorshim Bilchot HaPesach. That's a well-known Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 429, that we ask the halachot and discuss the Hilchot Pesach on Purim, which is the 30 days before the festival of Pesach. The Rambam tells us in Hilchot Kiddush HaChodesh chapter 4 that the leap year may be declared even in the month of Adar, but it's not declared on the 13th of Adar, as the day is fit to have been the 1st of Nisan. The Rambam also said in Hilchot Shkalim chapter 4, from the 1st of Nisan, when in those days they have communal offerings, so they purchase the new shekel that were collected in Adar. So even the animals were purchased with the old shekel and ready to use, they are redeemed and then treated as a non-sacred animal. So in other words, the counting of the year start always from the beginning of the month of Nisan. And that's applied in a way of Rosh Hashanah also for the Omer offering. Now we're counting the Omer every day. So the 16th of Nisan is the new year for the Omer offering. And the new year's of grain is permitted only after the Omer offering has been brought in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple. But since the destruction of the temple, new grain is permitted on the morning of the following day, which is the 17th of Nisan. Outside of Eretz Israel, the new grain is permitted only the day after that, the 18th of Nisan. That's Shulchan Aruch Yoreh De'ah 293. The same idea is regard to a meal offering. It is prohibited to bring a meal offering from the new grain before the Omer offering is brought. If one did so, it does not become a sacrifice. And that's Rambam Hilchot Midim U'Musafim, chapter 7. And also he said in chapter 8 that one should not bring the meal offering from the new grain or first fruit to the temple before the 2 loaves offering, but if he did so, it's still accepted, it's still valid.
לשולוים, מלאכי השולוים, מלאכי